Okay.
Noah Reynolds is here and David Ruffin is here.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start streaming.
Yes, please.
Okay, well, good afternoon. I want to thank the staff for the logistics in setting up this call. We had a little bit of a delay and apologize for that. We certainly want to welcome the listening public. Well, my name is David Ruffin. As chair of the Study Committee on Relocation of Monuments, I call this meeting to order. In a moment, I'm going to ask each member of the committee to identify themselves for our listening audience. I myself am director of DHG Credit Risk Management. I live in Raleigh. Although I'm not, like others on the commission, arguably certified professional historians, I've had a very long, lifelong passion for history, irrespective of professional career, largely in banking. This monuments issue obviously is not an ordinary or a routine task before us. Within the past week, I've had friends and professional acquaintances from all points on the political spectrum share a similar concern to me that in our work we find a solution that avoids contributing any more greatly to toxic dialogue or transit positions in the public square. As I stated at the September 22nd meeting, we live in a political environment where I win, you lose, and that's really, in my opinion, not just a zero-sum game, but arguably a negative-sum game. We all lose. This committee, not unlike the broader historical commission, is balanced with citizens of different political persuasions. But as I've gotten to know more about our individual backgrounds, I'm heartened by the fact that each most certainly takes our responsibilities very seriously. I, for one, want to find a just, equitable, and fair solution to the issues facing us. I believe the great majority, frankly, the people of this state also expect that from us. Thus, as your chair, I'm dedicating myself to that goal. And I look forward to working with each of you on this committee in particular and in the broader commission in general in the next several weeks as we go about our work. And I remind you that our charge is rather daunting, and that is to formulate our recommendations by the end of April. Now, this is obviously a public meeting. We're going to seek public input and almost assuredly hold public hearings. Accordingly, I'd like to share a decision I've made of late to this committee, and that is to better ensure a more effective process at our committee level. I, as your chair, will refrain from holding interviews or commenting in such a one-off public way that could in any way distract from our very serious work. This is not any attempt whatsoever to being non-transparent. As again I said September 22nd, we all have individual opinions, of course, but instead is an effort to honor the efficacy of this committee and its respective members, and in the end, the integrity of our joint recommendations. So at this time, I would like, again, primarily for the listening audience, to introduce the other members of the committee. And since we're not meeting face-to-face, this is, of course, by telephone hookup, I would ask in this order, Ms. Johnson, Mr. Dixon, Mr. Fondo, and Mr. Reynolds. So, Dr. Johnson, Valerie Johnson, I'd like to first, if you could share a little bit of your background and where you reside.
Yes, Dr. Valerie Johnson. I teach at Bennett College in Greensboro, North Carolina, and reside in Oxford, North Carolina. I am trained as an anthropologist and have been doing work in North Carolina for over 20 years. I have my main degree is in medical anthropology with an interest in our environmental and natural areas, but in that heritage preservation. So I come with that background. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
I also want to say that I chair the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission, and so I come with that perspective.
Great. Sambo Dixon.
Yeah, my name is Sam Dixon. I'm a lawyer. I live in Eden, North Carolina. I do a lot of capital defense work, representing the rights of people that sometimes aren't heard. and I also am very involved in local, state, and national preservation issues and groups, and also with the National Main Street Center in Chicago, looking for ways to continue to keep our small towns and our big cities viable.
Great. Chris Fondo.
Dr. Chris E. Fonville, Jr. I am with the Department of History at UNC Wilmington, where I teach American Civil War, the history of the South, history of the southeastern part of our state. I was born and raised in Wilmington. I have a lifelong interest in the history of our state, the history of the Civil War, and my publications and research have been principally on North Carolina during the Civil War. And I look forward to working with the committee members on this very important issue.
Thank you, Dr. Fondo. Noah Reynolds.
Hi, my name is Noah Reynolds. I live in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I do real estate development. I'm also involved in the local venture capital community and part owner in several startup businesses across the state of North Carolina. With respect to historic preservation, I've personally renovated several historic buildings through an adaptive reuse, and I've also participated in putting structures on the National Register of Historic Places as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah. As is appropriate, I think it would always be the case to ask the members of the committee if there perhaps is any conflict of interest relative to our charge. So again, since we're not in person, I would like to start with that, just answering none, or if there is any that you might elaborate. Dr. Johnson.
None.
Mr. Dixon.
None.
Dr. Fonville.
None.
Mr. Reynolds.
None.
And to my certain knowledge, none from me, David Ruffin. Okay, the charge before us, and this was largely the resolution submitted by Mr. Dixon and approved by the Commission on September 22nd, 2017, was to, one, present our findings as a committee of the broader commission by the end of April 2018. Secondly, we were to seek legal opinions from the Department of Justice of North Carolina, the UNC School of Government, and 6 law schools, those being Wake Forest, Duke University, Campbell University, North Carolina Central University, Elon University, and UNC at Chapel Hill. These specifically were to request opinions or positions on what actions the North Carolina Historical Commission may take under the current statute, whether the North Carolina Historical Commission may recommend additional sites as appropriate for relocation, and whether the North Carolina Historical Commission may recommend that monuments be reinterpreted. Thirdly, the charge of our work is that the State Historic Preservation Officer, obviously our own Dr. Kevin Cherry, provides any additional available information on prominence, honor, visibility, availability, and access of both the Capitol grounds and the Bentonville battleground. Fourth, Dr. Cherry, the State Historic Preservation Officer, would provide any relevant information on possible danger to the monuments and what measures may be needed to preserve them, and if there is any planned construction, renovation, reconfiguration that would affect these monuments. Fifthly, to seek advice from Yale history professor David Blight and Atlanta History Center President Sheffield Hale. And finally, to review memoranda and letters from the leadership of our State General Assembly, specifically leadership in the State House and the Senate, relative to this matter. So at this point, I would like to ask staff, I guess, Dr. Kerry, if you would detail for us or give us a status on where we stand with those solicitations.
Certainly. This is Kevin Cherry, and I am the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. And in that position, I serve as the Secretary to the North Carolina Historical Commission. We have solicited information regarding what actions the Historical Commission may take under statute and whether the Historical Commission may recommend additional sites, and whether the Historical Commission can recommend that monuments be reinterpreted from Duke University School of Law, Elon University School of Law, North Carolina Central University School of Law, UNC Chapel Hill's School of Law, Wake Forest School of Law, Campbell's Adrian Wiggins School of Law. So all of those law schools plus the School of Government at UNC have been solicited. We have not heard back from any of those institutions yet. I will let our general counsel detail how we will be going about seeking the advice from the North Carolina Department of Justice. That would be Phil Fagan. Phil, do you want to address that?
Sure. Phil Fagan, General Counsel to DNCR. The Department of Justice has a policy to require a written statement requesting a legal opinion, and so that has been prepared, needs to be signed by the chair, which we will have signed this week and submitted to the Department of Justice for their formal opinion on the matters.
All right. And then I, as the State Historic Preservation Officer, has been asked to provide any available information on prominence, honor, visibility, availability, and access of both the Capitol grounds and Bentonville Battlefield State Historic Site. And our staff to the committee has begun to gather that information, and we should have it to the committee soon. We've also been asked to gather any relevant information about the possible danger to the monuments and what measures are needed to preserve them, and if there's any planned construction, renovation, or reconfiguration on the Capitol grounds that would affect the monuments. We will soon begin seeking this information from state and local agencies. We've not begun to seek that information yet, but I feel that that won't take us long to gather that information from our fellow state agencies. As far as advice from Yale history professor David Blight and the Atlanta history president and CEO Sheffield Hale, we've solicited this information from these two gentlemen, and so far we've heard back from Dr. Blight, who is willing to provide his input to us. We have not yet heard back from Mr. Hale, and I have in addition to the correspondence to him, I have phone messages waiting on him. So I hope to speak with Mr. Hale soon. So that is the status report from the staff to the committee about our information seeking activities.
Well, irrespective of the extensiveness of the charge, which I think was quite appropriate, I feel compelled to ask the committee members at this point if you feel that there are other appropriate sources of information or opinion that you would like to suggest at this point.
I think we should talk with David Sasaki here in North Carolina. I would like to have his opinion. Dr. David Sasaki.
And a point of information, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Chair. Dr. Sasaki is an independent scholar who's noted for his writings, in particular on the coastal region of North Carolina.
Okay. This was Dr. Fondo's.
Yes,
right?
He's also done quite a bit of research and publications on race in North Carolina, along with Tim Tyson.
Okay. Would that be appropriate to put that in the form of a motion?
Okay, well,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make the motion that we seek the professional opinion of Dr. David Sasaki regarding the charge that the committee has undertaken.
Do I hear a second?
I have a question. Do you want us to put all the persons we want to recommend into one, or do them individually, starting with Dr. Sasaki?
Well, I think the time is nigh, and that we get those notifications started. Whatever venue we do that, Dr. Johnson, I'm really, unless there's a long list of add-ons, I think we ought to be able to hopefully identify those today, and get staff started on notifying these individuals of this request.
Okay, because I do have.
But if anybody else has opinions about that, certainly feel free.
Well, I think one of our curators at the Museum of History, Earl Imes, has done a considerable lot of work around the U.S. colored troops and monuments, and has been thoughtful about this whole issue as well. And I think he should be considered, or that his information should be obtained.
Dr. Johnson,
Uh-huh.
as an employee of the department,
Yeah.
we can seek out Mr. Imes for his information, but I think it would be inappropriate as essentially staff to the commission to provide his opinion. He can provide information like the rest of us, but to seek his opinion as we are the other individuals may not be appropriate, but that's up to the chair to decide.
Oh, I understand. And that's why I was kind of hesitant. I was wondering how would we get staff input, because there's a considerable amount of knowledge that I know our staff has in archives and history that would be useful in our deliberations. That's what I was getting at.
If the committee wishes, we can add Mr. Imes to the staff who are formally working on the report with the committee.
I would concur.
I would too.
Okay.
Well, sir, my perspective, and it's probably more of a question to Dr. Cherry on this, is that the predominance of knowledge at the department level, yes, as employees, would still be an open dialogue, would it not be, as we begin our deliberations? So we would not be constrained in our questions back to the staff, either through you or just to get more and more information. I mean, like you said, there may be a distinction between an opinion and just general data or general information, right?
That's right. We would, as staff in archives and history, we would all work to provide as much information as we can. There's just a slight difference, in my opinion, between seeking the expert advice and opinion of individuals outside of our department and staff who can provide that information in the report writing with the committee.
Okay.
Does anyone else, before we take this to a vote, does any other member of the committee have an individual they would like to seek an opinion from?
Chairman Ruffin, this is Noah Reynolds. I'm not sure who the exact person would be, but the plans to build a North Carolina Civil War Museum in Fayetteville, I think it's a $65 million project that's being led by the North Carolina Civil War History Foundation, and I think the state of North Carolina has put in some money for that as well. I would be interested in their thoughts on what a site of similar prominence, honor, visibility, availability, and access would be, since they're charged with creating a new such site. And I think that information might be helpful for us. I don't know who the person would be at the Civil War History Foundation, I think Mary Lynn Bryan is the vice president of the foundation. But I would suggest at the discretion of the chair or the the committee, if there's a particular person with that organization we could talk to.
Chairman, we've got a motion on the floor, and I don't know if all of this discussion is being added to as friendly amendment, but I think we still need a second on the motion that put forward.
Yes,
This is Dr. Favell. I made the motion to seek the opinion of Dr. Sasaki.
Uh-huh.
And we were just waiting for a second.
I'll second.
all right. All in favor of seeking the opinion of Dr. Sasaki, so indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay. Obviously, that's unanimous, so that's passed. Relative to Mr. Imes, I believe it is, and the Civil War Museum in Fayetteville, that Mayor, does Kevin, Dr. Chair, do you know whether they have a director established that foundation?
That foundation has officers. They have one staff member who is a consultant to that foundation. It would be, if the committee wants, the committee could request information from the board of that foundation, which will, at the next meeting of the North Carolina Historical Commission, will be asking, I believe, to change the name of that museum to the North Carolina Civil War and Reconstruction Center. So they'll be adding Reconstruction to the war.
And Kevin, just to have full disclosure, I've been on the advisory committee. This is Sam Dixon for the for the museum, trying to get it, trying to raise some money. So I mean, I don't know whether that has any effect at all, but I just put that out there. That's a possible conflict.
That's fine.
This is Dr. Johnson. I also think that we should hold space open for additional input, because we might not come up with the names of some additional folks right this minute, but I do believe that there are other persons that we should consult, and I just need to think a little bit carefully about who else should be considered, because we've got about 10 HBCUs with various persons who are involved in history, and it would be remiss not to have some input from that sector as well.
This is David Ruffin. I certainly agree with your point there. I think as we get further into this work, and particularly start dissecting opinions from all of these other sources, it's going to inevitably lead to, well, what about this? What about that? And then we certainly would hopefully have that open-mindedness to seek further information as we so need. I can't imagine that we would want to just, put a finite list and say, well, we just could not go beyond that. Do I hear a specific motion to either to include the data from Mr. Ives, I believe it is, and in specific the Civil War Museum of Fayetteville at this point, and then presumably could be just open-ended as other legitimate or qualified sources of information present themselves, they could be considered at a later stage.
I think we pulled Mr. Imes out as part of the scope of his work as an employee, and I would say that would be different than the history museum in Fayetteville. That they need to be de-linked because they're not, and that I think that what Dr. Cherry was saying needs to go forward. That we just can be mindful that he's a part of the conversation that we're going to have with staff.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Okay. That being said, is there a motion relative to the Civil War Museum of Fayetteville?
Well, do I need to move it since I brought it up?
Yes.
Okay. So I would move that we include representatives with respect to the North Carolina Civil War and Reconstruction Museum planned for Fayetteville, and that directly we contact the North Carolina Civil War History Foundation for input as to the specific person that can provide us with that guidance.
Okay.
I'll second. I'll second that, Dr. Fondo. I'll second the motion.
All right. Any other discussion? All right. The motion by Mr. Reynolds was that we seek the input of Civil War Museum and Reconstruction being planned for Fayetteville. And it has been so moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right, it is unanimously approved. Okay, again, any other specific source of expertise that we would seek an opinion of at this point in time?
This is Sam Dixon. Kevin, I just want to ask a quick question. Did the law schools give you any idea when they get back with you?
No, they have not. And remember, I don't think that law schools give sort of a corporate interpretation of the law. I think what they have to do is ask if there are individual professors within the faculty who would like to take this on and provide interpretation. I might be mistaken there, but I really don't think that law schools come together and give an interpretation of a law as a school of law. So
I agree with that.
What I imagine is going to be happening is the dean of these law schools will be soliciting faculty, maybe one or two members, I don't know, whose interests align with this topic to provide input. So we've not heard back for how long it might take.
Okay, well, I will, hearing no other motions for anyone specific, again, from my perspective, it would seem only prudent that we would add people to that list as it becomes more either pertinent or appropriate as we get into our deliberations. Okay, I'd like to move on, if we could, on the agenda, which is basically the discussion regarding the solicitation of public comment. One of the issues that, or one of the suggestions has been made, I think, practically that a web portal be established to allow the public to make comments and to give input, and that would be, again, perhaps one of the more efficient and effective ways to do that. Any discussion from the committee members relative to that? Dr. Reynolds, I would believe this would be a portal that would be easily identifiable or accessed at the NC Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. Is that accurate? On the website?
Yes, sir. We would create a web portal. Our department would create a web portal and then send out notices seeking public's input and showing how that they could provide that input through the web portal. It's something that we last did, or the Historical Commission last did, when it sought public input on the on the proposed African American monument on state capitol grounds.
And Will, this is Johnson again. will there be a mechanism for those who contact us through snail mail as opposed to electronic means, like getting that information to a central spot?
Dr. Johnson, if you would like, we could put on that same portal for individuals who wish to send a traditional U.S. mail-based letter, that they could send it to the department, to my attention. We also could make that same notice we could also make that same suggestion in the notice that goes out to draw people's attention to the online portal.
Okay. Thank you.
I think we can all agree that public input is absolutely crucial. I think our work needs to be as transparent as possible. So I would be very much in favor of creating this portal for public input. This is Dr. Fondo.
Yeah, this is Noah Reynolds. I had a comment as well. I've got probably 8 or 9 letters that have been mailed to me, which I've kept and read. And there were a couple of letters that had the same sentiment. And I wanted to read a couple of sentences from one of them. You probably all got a copy of it. I'm not going to read the opinion as to what they're for or against, but just that this is the way the letter opened up. Dear Sir, I wish to submit to you a very pleasant, respectful, and articulate letter. I am embarrassed to write to someone who I do not know and is not one of my elected representatives, yet I am compelled to do so for reasons beyond my control. So I think there's some confusion amongst the public about, we're not elected officials, we're an appointed committee, and what is the process? Normally, if you're an elected official, you have staff and a way to get letters and things out to that, but we're just private citizens on a committee or public servants in that respect. But some public forum, a published official forum where people know how to communicate to the committee, I think that would be a really good idea.
I've personally got a lot of emails and U.S.-based letters and with correspondence supporting both sides of the issue. And I think it would be more appropriate, speaking as a member of the committee, that we have a more effective, efficient way of getting public input rather than them contacting the committee members individually.
I agree with that. I just know that people are still going to feel the need to contact us individually, and I think that we just need a mechanism to make sure that information is centralized or gets to be part of the whole record. I think we definitely want to encourage people to use that public portal in a centralized place, but I just know that there are going to be folks who want to weigh in and are just going to do so. And so I just want us to be prepared for those other unsolicited kinds of input.
Mm-hmm.
And this is David Ruffin. I certainly am receiving a number of those correspondences and communications as well in various forms. I think what we're saying here, just to be, I like that, maybe Dr. Bumble that made this point, this is really just an attempt to be even further open and further accommodate public opinion.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Is it to try to say either or this is the only mechanism by which you should feel comfortable expressing your opinion?
Absolutely. I'm not offended by receiving the various communiques from the public. That's fine. I'm just trying to suggest that there might be a more efficient, effective way for the public at large to make contact with all of us.
Okay. Do we hear, of course, there's not a motion at this point, but can I entertain a motion for establishment of the web portal?
I so move.
I'll second that.
I'll have to flip the coin as to who's the motion, who's the second. Okay.
Valerie, so moves.
Okay, thank you. The yeas for that motion that we would instruct the staff to create a web portal easily accessible by the public, but also in containing specific information how to address traditional mail, so as which the committee can be apprised of all public communication through either of these two means.
Mm-hmm.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Okay, it is approved. Okay, the next point relative to public comment obviously is public hearings. I think it's on our agenda as much as anything to reassure the transparency of our deliberations and the fact that the public hearings, I think, are a quite necessary aspect of this. I guess there are two questions on the table relative to this from my perspective, and that is any objection to eventually holding public hearings, but secondly, the timing of that may well be more appropriately dictated by the pace of our deliberations and the movement by which we begin to start looking like recommendations are beginning to be formed. But just as an open discussion here, I'd like some feedback from the committee members relative to public hearings. And the
This
staff
is Sam Dixon. I
component-
definitely think we need them. I mean, I think it needs to be efficiently done, and I mean, try to do them in a way that, that we have them, and then we then have the portal also, so that we're getting a way to communicate with people both ways.
Dr. Kerry, go ahead, Dr. Johnson.
I was just gonna urge us to make sure that we've got clear goals in mind, that these are not just venting sessions, that we want to hear from the public, but to frame it in a way that can move to action and not just, I know it's delicate, but I don't want we don't have a whole lot of time before April, and so we still have the information to gather, to consider, and then we hold these public hearings. We need to be clear about what it is that we are asking from the public in terms of what we want their input to be.
So I certainly think that if you hold public hearings before the committee has really done much work, you're asking for that kind of open-ended venting as you used it, and I think that would not necessarily serve the right purposes. But I think the clear issue here is to make sure there's unanimity, I guess, around the desire to ultimately schedule public hearings once we have substantive recommendations that appear to be forming. Is that a fair way to describe that?
Mm-hmm.
For me,
Well,
yes.
Yes, well, well said, and I concur, Dr. Fondo.
And I think the staff, Dr. Cherry, I think as you indicated in the past, there have been public hearings in addition to the web portals. Is there any comments you'd like to make around or input around that issue?
That's right, sir. Some study committees have used public hearings, some have not. When there's a topic of this importance, we've had public hearings, and the numbers of those hearings have ranged from one to a couple. Given the logistics and the speed which the committee needs to work, multiple public hearings might not be possible. Maybe the committee may want to consider one fairly long public hearing rather than a number of short public hearings, just because of the logistics involved in setting up this kind of public hearing. But that's just a suggestion. It's up to the committee.
Well, we have a choice today, I guess, since this topic was brought up, to either formally propose or declare that we will indeed have public hearing or hearings, unspecified at this point in terms of time, or we can just proceed to wait until we have more substantive work under our belt and then move in that direction. Now, I'm open for any discussion on that. So that distinction between a formal embracing of a public hearing at this juncture, or the spirit being that we probably will certainly have them, but yet to be scheduled and determined.
This is Mr. Reynolds. I think that we should have at least one public hearing, and I do agree that it would be better to have that at such a time as we have more information in hand. So that pushes it out on the calendar a little bit.
And this is Sam Dixon. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, Chris Marvel, I absolutely agree with that.
And I do too, Valerie.
Well, I didn't hear a formal motion on that. I will share my personal opinion on that. Is I do believe that the state of North Carolina deserves whatever rationale is behind any recommendations we make as a committee, and therefore it is not just a matter of hearing the public's opinion. It's really also, frankly, explaining and disclosing the processes we went through. And rationale for whatever recommendations we may make. So I think it's a two-way street, and I absolutely feel a public hearing is quite critical to our mission. The question is whether we put specificity around that at this particular point in time, or whether we just agree conceptually that's something we want to do, but we'll wait until, it sounds like a lot of consensus is we certainly cannot schedule a public hearing today.
Right.
Chairman, I could put a motion on the floor.
Yes, okay.
I'd like to put a motion on the floor that the committee will agree to hold a minimum of one public hearing at such a time before April that we feel we have enough research and information that we've requested come in to where we can have a productive hearing.
I'll second that. This is Dr. Johnson.
All right. Any further discussion on the motion for public hearings? There not being any, then I'll call for a vote. All in favor of a motion to have a minimum of one public hearing at a time later to be scheduled, but prior to the conclusion of our work as a committee, state by saying aye.
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 Okay, that is approved as well. Okay, relative to meetings, generally, I think the scheduling of future meetings, we certainly are under a time crunch. We understand that. We do have a whole litany of requests out for valuable information. But it's my sense, and maybe not the sense of the rest of the committee, that scheduling of a future meeting as of this day, today, may be a little bit problematic, but I would encourage the staff to give us perhaps periodic progress that's being made so that we can begin to look at calendars and commence with our work as soon as practically possible.
The staff will certainly communicate on a regular basis with the committee about what we have received and what we've not received, and the progress we've made on gathering the information so that you can make the best decision possible.
Are there any in the committee that feel otherwise that we should, at this point, go ahead and schedule, let's say, certainly within 24 hours, a meeting that we could begin this process, irrespective of information having come in or not?
I do think maybe we should consider coming up with a tentative next meeting date, so that's sort of a goal to shoot for and see what we have received by that time. And then if it's not sufficient, we can then, go through the process of postponing, but it helps to kind of know that this is coming up and seeing what we have by the time that date arrives. Because right now it feels real open-ended and our calendars fill up really quickly. So I think we need to hold some time anticipating that we will get the information.
Be curious to know what Dr. Cherry thinks along those lines. I'm of the opinion that I'd much prefer to get updates on the progress that staff has been able to make before setting a specific date for the next meeting.
We will, whether we set a specific date or a week range or whatever, we will provide regular communications to the committee as we receive the information. I agree with the chair that a specific date may not be possible, but a goal for sort of a general time period, like the last week of or the first week of or something like that, might be something that we shoot for at this point.
Yes.
What, Dr. Cherry, what do you think is feasible? End of February? You hope to have gathered enough information to warrant a second meeting?
I think that is reasonable, and if we haven't received a lot of information before that, you will certainly know that from our communications, and you may want to, the chair, setting the date for meetings is the prerogative of the chair, and the chair can then set the date that he sees fit.
Well, my personal bias on this, to be honest with you, would be absolutely to have a meeting prior to the end of February.
Right.
I think, again, time is of the essence here, and we have to, we've got a lot to digest, and it would be my sense that we almost certainly would want to schedule it before February expires.
Works for me.
And I imagine we will have information through a public portal by then as well.
Well, I'm not sure we need a formal proposal or motion at this point, but is the consensus of the committee that we will work with staff in exchange of information and the degree to which we can receive or not receive these solicitations, but with the idea of absolutely scheduling a meeting sometime in the month of February. And as we progress, I think we need to be, again, sharing, or at least with staff, the availability of calendars. And I can work with Dr. Cherry on here are dates that could be available, and therefore would reach out to the members to see if we could sync our calendars.
Sounds good.
I don't necessarily there's a need for
that's good.
Chairman Ruffin, this is Mr. Reynolds. I'm assuming this will be an in-person meeting. Would that be correct? Or are we going to have, when we do this?
That would be up to the committee.
I mean,
well, if we have an in-person meeting, either way, if we have an in-person meeting, I would just want to make sure we had like Skype or call-in for those that couldn't come in person. I just want to make sure we all have the maximum flexibility to attend, given that we don't know the dates yet, and they're coming up soon.
Again, this is really for discussion and just opinions of thoughts on that area. I personally would prefer in-person meeting on this, but I do understand even trying to sync 5 people who've got other responsibilities, that sometimes can be problematic. But I do personally would prefer an in-person meeting.
I would like to meet in person as well if I'm able to make it.
Same here. Chris Fondo.
Yeah, this is Dixon. I would love to. I just don't know whether I can get out of court. I have court almost every day.
And I too, this is Dr. Johnson, in person would be preferable, but we'll work out what we need to work out.
Okay. Well, other than we'll turn back to Dr. Cherry. Are there any announcements from the staff or any other items that you would want to apprise us of at this point?
No, sir. There's not another. There are not any other announcements pertaining to this topic. We do think that there will probably be a North Carolina Historical Commission, the full commission meeting, that will not be dealing with monuments, but other issues related to the Office of Archives and History in the next few weeks, maybe month and a half. Our called meeting that usually happens in the early spring.
And that will be for the entire commission, right?
That's the entire commission that will deal with other matters other than monuments.
Right. Well, I just want again to thank Dr. Johnson and Mr. Dixon, Dr. Fondo, and Mr. Reynolds very much for the unselfish dedication to join this committee. We have a lot ahead of us. I know it'll be, as I said, it's not an ordinary or routine matter, but I think we're all prepared to tackle it in the way we need to. And again, I look very much forward to working with the 4 of you, as well as certainly Dr. Cherry and Phil Fagan, the General Counsel, and other members of the staff of the department. So thank you all very, very much. Are there any other questions at this point? Otherwise, I think we can move to an adjournment, or I'll entertain a motion for adjournment for today.
So moved.
Second that
Okay.
motion.
Well, thank you all very much again, and we will be in communication as quickly as reasonably possible around when our next meeting occurs.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. And
Bye.
thank you, Dr. Cherry.
You're welcome. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Hey, bye-bye.